Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. This video I'm continuing my discussion into human rights, using the text Human Rights in the World Community to guide the analysis. All of the notes for the lecture comes from my reading of the text. Also, if you guys want access to the notes, you know how this goes. Click the banner that pops up, or click the link in the description field. It'll take you to the notes. In this particular section of the analysis, I'm going to be on page 4 of my notes, and it will cover section 3 in the notes as well. So with that, let's begin. Human rights. This is section 3. Okay. In this section, what we're going to do is look at a very important conception, and it's the 3 generations of human rights. We're going to look and identify each of the generations, make sense of what it means to talk about a generation of human rights, what defines that particular generation, each of the 3 generations of human rights, and then finally incorporate that discussion into a broader analysis, a broader discussion of contemporary human rights. So at the very top, this is going to be 3 generations of human rights. Alright, so 3 generations of human rights, and we begin with a quote from the text. The quote is, "The 3 generations are used to be cumulative, overlapping, and it is important to note interdependent and interpenetrating," right? So that the 3 generations of human rights they're overlapping, right? It's not that they're mutually exclusive, that if we're talking about the first generation, we can't also be talking about the 3rd generation. The concepts that we'll develop, and I'm just saying this to begin, later I'll flesh this out and make more sense. The concepts that we'll develop, as you'll see later, will overlap. So when we talk about the 3 generations, we're going to start with the first here. Right, we'll talk about the first generation here, second here, first, second, and then the 3rd here. Okay, so some of the key points in each of the 3 generations. The first thing that we recognize is the first generation is civil and political rights, right? So it's important. This is an attempt to articulate and make sense of civil and political rights. Okay. So the first generation, we're looking at civil and political rights. And this is known as liberté. My French isn't all that good. L-I-B-E-R-T-E. Okay, first generation, civil and political rights, and the concept, the overarching concept is liberté. First generation, 1A. It originated in the 17th and 18th century reformist theories, just FYI. If you're interested in that, go look and do more investigation into reformist theories. My sort of pedagogical style, since I'm a theorist, is I will give you reference to the historical information, to the relevant historical data, but I'm not a historian, so I don't do sort of historical situatedness. I'm more conceptual. So this account of human rights will be a conceptual human rights. Number 1B, conceptualizes human rights, and this is important for me at least, conceptualize the idea of first generation human rights, conceptualizes human rights in terms of a freedom from, right? It is a freedom from, and I actually want a different color for that. We make sense of this as a freedom right? We're going to think about human rights, first generation human rights, liberté, in terms of a freedom from. That is, rights are conceptualized in negative terms rather than positive terms, right? So if I say that individuals have a freedom to a freedom to freely express their religious and political beliefs, a freedom to speech, so on, positive affirmation of rights. First generation rights, civil and political rights, are conceptualized, not entirely, but for the most part, this is sort of a generalized account, for the most part are understood in terms as a freedom from. So, what are some examples? An example might be a freedom from discrimination. Right? Individuals have, especially in an attempt to make sense of civil liberties, personal autonomy, my right to self-determination, I have a right to be free from discrimination. I have a right to be free from slavery. I have a right to be free from torture, free from arbitrary arrest, free from interference in my private affairs. Right? So when we think of the idea of a freedom from, sort of this pejorative sense, what we're saying is there is an external threat. Right? Here is the particular citizen, right? And if we are looking at freedom from, right? If we're talking about a freedom from, then we have something here. We have something here that is potentially dangerous, right? There's something here that's potentially dangerous, and I have a right to, in a sense, protect myself, just as conceptually, right? I have a right to protect myself from the attack. I have the right, if the attack is torture, if the attack is unfair arrest, if the attack is slavery or discrimination, if it is an invasion of my privacy, I have the right to be free from those things. Remember what we said in the last discussion is that anytime we evoke the idea of rights, we also evoke the corresponding concept of duties to protect those rights. So we recognize that insofar as we're talking about our civil rights, if I'm talking about a freedom from, right, freedom from some caustic, dangerous, and something that is potentially going to challenge my right to self-determination, if I claim those rights, then there has to be a duty. You immediately understand now why the first generation, and this is very important, right? You immediately understand why first generation human rights, civil and political, are in a sense wed, right? If you think about this conceptually, and this is important, right? If you think about this conceptually, if I say I have a civil right, I have a right to be free from torture, to be free from slavery, to be free from discrimination, all of these concepts, to be free from arbitrary arrest, all of these concepts, torture, to be free from arbitrary arrest, discrimination, these require an establishment, right? There has to be an establishment in place to fulfill that duty, right? There has to be an establishment in place to prevent me from being enslaved, right? We're not just saying that, Bob down the street can't enslave me. We're not saying that, Mary down the street can't discriminate against me. We're saying I have the right to be free from discrimination. There has to be an institution in place that protects that right, right? So there has to be an institution in place that protects these rights that I'm claiming, right? These rights to be free from. Obviously, that institution becomes Big Brother, right? Big Brother's supposed to keep us free from those potential threats to our right to self-determination. So the government now accepts this obligation, right? So if we have a right, there must be a corresponding duty, and that duty immediately becomes political, right? Which is why we necessarily see the relationship between first generation rights in terms of civil rights and not civil rights in sort of the 1960 sort of contemporary sense, right? But also not excluding that. The political establishment, the political power, the status quo, if you will, is obligated to recognize these rights within members of its citizenry. As I said before in the last discussion, and if you just think about it sort of commonsensically, right? And this is we always start very general. We'll make this a lot more complicated in a couple minutes or whatever.